Hey everyone, how's it going?
Hey guys, happy Friday.
Yep. So Jordan and I were just talking about house hacking. If you've watched anything from us or been to any of our meetups, you know that we're big fans of house
Oh yeah.
hacking. And if you don't know what that means, basically that's where you generate income off of your house, right? So normally it's a duplex more often than not, but fourplex account, threeplexes, even single families.
Oh yeah. I've been doing a lot of those in Minneapolis, St. Paul too.
Yeah, so I mean, a house hack doesn't necessarily mean you make money on your house. It just means that other people are helping pay a part or all of your mortgage. Jordan wrote a book on it, by the way. He doesn't probably want to brag about that or anything, but if you're interested in the
Yeah.
book, you can, if you email him, he can send you a digital copy of it,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And it's on my website too. So if you look up Jordan Moorhead on Google, that'll pop up with our Keller Williams website and it's on there too. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Lots of ways to get it.
So there's a lot of topics on house hack, but
Mhm.
Jordan and I, what we were kind of seeing over and over again is people running into the same problem, and we want to address one, if not two, of those problems today.
Oh yeah.
And it's one that Jordan calls the comfortability factor. So Jordan, what is the comfortability factor on a?
So
What are you talking about when you say that on a house hack?
comfortability factor, there's the real far end of it, like Craig Kurlop, he's a real popular guy at Bigger Pockets. He actually also wrote a book on house hacking, which is great, and you should pick that up. But he lived in a living room of his duplex and rented out all the rooms in his unit and also the other unit. I was probably one step a little further in the comfortable direction. I rented out all the rooms in my unit and I rented out the other unit. I even Airbnb'd a back porch in my unit. So, I was still not uncomfortable, but not living in a luxurious life. But I was making money while I was living there. And then there's all the way to the other end. If you've got a really nice duplex and you live in the unit on your own, maybe with a significant other, and you rent out the other unit, or you have a single family house with some sort of accessory dwelling unit that you're renting out either on Airbnb or just a long term rental. So it really depends how far do you want to go. And I think it's important that you figure that out.
So comfortability is kind of a big portion is like how nice is it, kind of,
Oh,
right?
yeah, that
Right,
too.
like how nice is the space and how high end is it? Is that kind
Hmm.
of what you're thinking, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about
So,
that.
for instance, I had my duplex. My first duplex was a good example too. The unit that I rented out was a nice unit. It was in good shape. It wasn't hyper luxury, but it was a nice place. So I rented that unit out right away. The unit that I lived in was old. It had bad carpet and had bad paint. Everything needed to be redone in the common areas, and I did that before I moved in. So I at least had somewhere decent to put my furniture. The kitchen and bathroom were in disgusting shape. It all needed to be cleaned. It needed the mold removed and mildew. The cabinets and kitchen countertops and all the appliances needed to be redone too. But at the time, it was more important to me to live for free. I had a roommate willing to do this with me and save so much money by not having a really nice unit. We could have rented the bad unit or fixed it up and then rented it. But I didn't really have the money to do that the right way. So we could have lived in the nice unit and we could have slowly pieced together the bad unit, but I would have lost a lot of money doing that.
Yeah. So Jordan, if someone wants to house hack, like they see benefit in it, but now they're starting to run into these comfortability issues. Well, first of all, like before I actually, I'm going to ask a different question first.
Mhm.
Um, who do you see being having the biggest issue with the comfortability factor? Like what type of person or what circumstances do they have in order to like for this to be a problem for them? Who is that normally?
People that have already gotten somewhere in that lifestyle creep. They got out of college, they were living with roommates then, and they're living in a nice apartment, they drive a nice car, they have nice things. So the guys that I have the easiest time with and really the most successful house hacking are people in college already, or they're living with roommates. Maybe they live with three or four other people already. So it's no big deal to just keep doing that, save a ton of money, and do it in somewhere that you own, you're paying down the mortgage on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's totally cool when you're doing that. But when you're used to living in this nice luxury apartment, and then you start to try to find somewhere a duplex to live that maybe was built in the early 1900s and it's been updated, but it's not Class A luxury downtown North Loop apartment quality, it's going to be hard for you to get your head around, well, I want to move out of this super nice apartment where I'm really comfortable and I have all these amenities and I'm going to move into this duplex. But really, you've got to look at the long-term effects of doing that. You're stretching yourself thin to pay that apartment rent, and maybe not stretching yourself thin, but you're spending a third or more of your income to pay this apartment rent. You're not getting ahead in life. You can live in a duplex for a few years and save a ton of money. You can really get ahead in life.
And so, Jordan, obviously, the person who is fresh out of college, who's used to that more modest lifestyle, isn't going to have these issues. So,
Yeah.
if someone who's watching this has had that lifestyle creep, as you called it, is now at a point they're living in a luxury downtown condo, what sort of thought process would, if they're interested in talking about it, like what sort of advice or thought processes would you give them?
I think you really need to find your why. You need to figure out, why is this important? Why did you even have this idea? Do you have a bigger goal than just living in a nice condo downtown? Maybe you want to travel the world when you're in your 40s. Maybe you want to not work in your late 30s or early 40s. And doing this house hacking strategy is going to get you closer to whatever goal you have, whether or not it's starting a business or retiring early or just being financially sound. It's going to get you closer to that. And living in that downtown condo is not going to help with any of that.
You know, one thing I am hearing from the mortgage side is I do actually hear a lot of people who they actually have very good incomes, but they don't like their jobs very much.
Yeah.
They do it because it pays well. And so I think for most people, when they talk about financial freedom and retiring, and a lot of times I think it's because what it is, they don't want to necessarily give up lifestyle, but they want to work a job that wouldn't pay as well, or they don't necessarily want to stop working, but they can't make nothing. Yet they they can't make nothing, yet they don't want to give up their lifestyle, so they're looking to supplement with income.
Sure.
And so I think that they got to kind of look at that long-term goal, right? Like, okay, fine, we know you can afford we know you can afford an expensive car. We know you can afford this. We know you can afford that. But is that going to set you up for, is that going to keep you working in a job you hate, right?
Yeah.
And actually get you more committed to a job you hate, because eventually you get these bills that you can't do any other way, right?
People trap themselves. We really trap ourselves
trap,
with the commitments we have financially. And house hacking really just opens you up. It frees the trap. With house hacking, I went from paying $1,200 a month in mortgage to paying nothing a month in mortgage, actually making $400 a month. So my entire life changed then. I was able to travel more. I was able to take more risks. I actually became a realtor while living in my first house hack and was able to take that risk. Take a risk on doing something I loved because I didn't really have any expenses.
Excuse me, makes sense. So you said something important, and I think, so Jordan bought his house several years ago now and got a sweet deal on it, but also bought it at the right time. The only other issue I wanted to bring up today is I see a lot of people coming in and they're expecting to live rent free.
Sure.
And we have done that for a few people, but we certainly don't do it for most, right? I mean, let's face it, like most of our clients who house hack pay $400 a month, $500 a month to $700 a month, right? That's typical. And then some live rent free.
I think the comfortability factor comes back in there. So if you want the whole unit to yourself, if you're 25, 26, I did it until I was 29, live with a roommate, and I lived completely free. So if you have to take in the comfortability factor into effect. So yeah, if you want to live in a whole unit by yourself, maybe you have a significant other, maybe you have a kid, it just doesn't make sense to have a roommate or somebody else in the extra room. Then you might pay a couple $100 a month to live. But if you're willing to rent out rooms to friends or family or whoever, then you're absolutely going to have a good chance at living completely for free.
Yeah, for sure. So Jordan, can you give a couple recommendations of what people should be doing? Sorry, shut that off. Just some recommendations for people who are house hacking. Like, for example, if they're looking at comfortability, could you give them like a frame of reference of what they might want to compare their lifestyle to?
Yeah, so I just live like you did in college, at least for a little while, or right out of college. It's only a year. You only have to live in a house hack for a year per loan standards.
Mhm.
But if you do this for a few years, maybe 3, 4, 5 years, maybe you have $1 million worth of property or more. So if you can put up with a little bit of uncomfortability for a short amount of time relative to your life, you're going to be in a really great spot. Where I have a buddy that has 5 house hacks now that he's done, and he's at the point where he doesn't need to work anymore. He works because he wants to and he enjoys his job, but he really doesn't need to work. And he's just done this in 5 years of house hacking. So that's how easy this is to do. It's not impossible to do this. It's just you got to put up a little bit of uncomfortability. So you did it at some point in time. At some point in time, you lived with other people and lived a little uncomfortable. And it wasn't that bad when you did it. So why is it such a big deal to do that for just a little while?
Right. Can you talk about like what sort of what people should keep in mind when they're house hacking? Like what sort of house or what sort of characteristics would make it for a good house hack?
Sure, you want to find something that's obviously going to be rentable. You're going to need to rent it out when you leave. So after some period of time, you're going to leave the place and you're not going to live in it anymore, whether it's a single family or it's a duplex and it's certain units. But you really, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, it doesn't really make sense to get 1-bedroom units and duplexes. You want at least 2-bedroom units. You want something decent. I think looking for features like a dishwasher, and you do this a lot of your rentals, dishwashers, washer and dryer, at least on site. So maybe there's one in the basement of the duplex. Just having decent kitchens and bathrooms. It doesn't need to be nice. It doesn't have to be granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, but just something decent is a big deal when it comes to renting places because tenants want that too, and they're willing to pay it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the median rent in the Twin Cities is around $1,700, and when people are putting down almost $2,000, they want a decent place to live.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, look for something that's decent. Look for something that's in a decent area. You have to live in it for a year, and other people are going to have to live there after you're not there. So if you get it in the worst neighborhood, maybe it's going to cash flow well, but it's going to be hard to rent out to good people after you're done. So make it somewhere you want to live. You have to live there for at least a year.
Yeah. So the other thing I'd mention too is when you analyze one of these, house hacks, one of the reasons why they're so wonderful is you put a very small down payment,
Oh, yeah.
like 3.5%. Yeah. So my clients come to me and they analyze it. And like I said, a lot of them want to live rent free, and it's not very realistic if you're only putting 3% down in the current market to do that. You can, but it's not realistic, especially if you're not willing to sacrifice a little.
Yeah.
If you are, by the way, we have done them this year where people do live rent free, so it's possible, but they're sacrificing some.
And they had a whole unit to themselves, even.
Yeah, so. Yeah. But normally they don't. But when you're analyzing these numbers, you have to analyze it as if you're not living there, right? What's it going to look like when you move out and you do rent that other unit? I see a lot of people where they're not necessarily looking at that right away, and their expectations are $2,000 when it comes to how great it's going to be while they live there, and you're reducing your expenses dramatically, living almost rent-free, possibly rent-free, sometimes making a couple dollars if you Airbnb out a room and you do this and that and everything, and it all goes well. But analyzing those numbers upon move out is a pretty big deal, and realizing that it gets better over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I bought a property from a very old landlord, and at the closing table, he said, no, so you're probably not going to make a lot of money for the first 2 or 3 years, but over time, rents go up and your expenses don't go up that much. Your mortgage payment doesn't go up that much. So you're going to make good money over a 10-year period or a 20-year or 30-year period. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you might not crush it year one. And I think people make that big mistake of, what am I going to do day one? How am I going to make this great money day one? And I don't even look at rental properties like that. I think, what am I going to do in the first year? So I'm going to make some improvements to it. I'm going to raise the rents, and what's it going to look like a year from now?
Yep, absolutely. Our first property, we'll leave you with this, but that's a great idea. Our first property, we made $150 a month on it when we bought it. Jordan sold it for us this year. We made over $1,500 a month when it was done. Oh, wow. So over 10 times the cash flow. And that was after we refinanced, pulled cash out, bought another house that made us $1,400 a month, right?
Yeah.
So
awesome.
that was over a 15-year period. But like if we hadn't have went in that refinance and pulled the cash out, right, we would have made more than the 1,500 a month.
Oh, yeah.
So rents really do change over time. Like over a long period of time, it really does change. So
Yeah, and
really
you
good.
can't count on them to go up 7% a year, but they're going to go up a little bit every year. And over a long period of time, maybe 2 or 3%, that's going to add up.
For sure.
Compounding interest is really, it's definitely one of the wonders of the world.
Yeah, for sure. So if you have any other questions or comments, please feel free to put the questions below, and we'll make sure we answer them in a future video. How's that?
Yeah, thanks guys. Thanks
Cool.
for tuning in.
Cheers.